Well, for more on this topic, I'm joined by Joe Minarik, Senior Vice President and Director of Research at CED. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
So let's take a look at the demographic group that the U.S. does spend the most money on. Who are the front runners there?
Well, it's certainly the elderly, which is motivated by several things. I mean, one, of course, is we do, like most countries, have a national pension program, our Social Security system, and that is geared, if necessary, to provide kind of a bare minimum standard of living. You multiply that kind of an amount times the entire size of our elderly population and consider that it's growing. People are living longer with a reversal in the last couple of years, which of course is sad. We had that baby boom generation, which now is aging into the Social Security system fairly aggressively. So that's always going to be expensive. It's not necessarily misplaced, but the problem is you put that together with all of the other government expenditures with which we are stuck. Interest on the debt, of course, is one that's going to be growing very rapidly.
Right.
And it makes it hard for us to devote the kinds of resources that we want to our children. President Bush said he wanted to be the education president, but he then followed that up by saying that we couldn't do as much as he wanted because we had more will than wallet. And that's where we are today.
So to that end then, as we look at the fact that already not as much is being spent on the younger generation, but then we're also now seeing further cuts, how is the government adjusting then to represent this younger, more diverse population?
Well, the diversity, of course, is an important aspect of it. But the difficulty, again, is the expansion in the other parts of the budget. So where do you cut back? Healthcare costs are growing very rapidly, in part because of the aging of the population, in addition to the fact that the cost of delivering healthcare is rising for everybody. So now you have both the federal government and the state governments, which are largely responsible for kindergarten through 12 education. The federal government puts a reasonable amount of cash into post-secondary education. And those amounts are being squeezed. And that's essentially where we're adjusting, but that's a very painful place to adjust.
So in terms of the best time, the optimal time to invest in a child's development, when would you say that is?
Well, if you believe the research in terms of physical development and the research that has been done experimentally, and there are some very strong claims in this direction that some people challenge, but it seems as though the most productive thing you can do is to invest at the preschool level. You find that if children reach the first grade and they have not been exposed to language, people don't read to them, they don't have the opportunity to begin to learn their basics. If they're behind in the first to third grade range, they have a very, very hard time catching up. And the ability of a child to read at, say, the third grade level is apparently a very accurate indicator of whether that child is going to succeed in life, including falling into crime even. So that's where we need to make progress.
So let's take a broader look at that. Help us understand the longer term effects when you don't invest in children, some of the longer term economic consequences.
Well, the costs really begin fairly early on. The need to repeat a grade, the need for extra disciplinary efforts on the parts of schools, that begins to add to costs very early on. Then when you get past the high school period and you find children graduating from high school without being ready for a career or for college, then you wind up with public assistance obligations. You have, in some instances, the costs of crime and law enforcement. It really does appear as though if we can get children started well, and then, of course, you have to continue to deliver good quality education as you move along. You can't stop with preschool. But you can get a child started well, or you could get a child started poorly. And in the latter instance, it becomes expensive.
So as we look at how other countries are funding this, whether it's governments, non-governmental associations, private companies, who's getting it right in terms of the model that really best puts children in the position to really succeed long term?
Well, there are countries, particularly some in Western Europe, that, number one, collect much more in taxes than we do as a share of their gross domestic products, the income that they generate in total. And then in some instances, you have countries that really invest very heavily starting at the preschool level. The problem here in the United States, we are much worse in our performance in attendance at preschool. For some children, that may not be a big deal. If you have a child who is growing up in a comparatively affluent family that values education, where the parents are well educated, that child will be exposed to reading, to new ideas, to the basics of mathematics. It's the children who do not have that kind of support and are not enrolled in quality preschool where the results are worse. And here in the United States, we have had some aversion, apparently because some people are concerned about children being taken out of the home and the possibility that they will not receive the guidance that the parents should have. But early childhood education really is a sophisticated skill, and we in this country have not really valued it.
All right, thank you so much. A very important topic. Always good to have you.